So if you like, another thing about this whole case that is interesting again is, this law that has caught Wontumi was a law that Akufo-Addo and his government framed. They amended. Wontumi would not have gone in for 20 years. He would have possibly had 3 years imprisonment. Cool. Or possibly 2 years, because that would have been the maximum. But Akufo-Addo, when he came into power in 2017, said he was hanging his political career on the line to deal with illegal money. To show us that he meant business, he did one thing. He amended the law to make it stiff in terms of the penalty. So they introduced 15 to 20 years if you breach that law. So until Akufo-Addo came, Wontumi was simply going to get a maximum of 3 years. And then they changed it. And then they said, well, look, we are fighting Galamsey. Say. We don't want people involved. We want to make sure that when you feel you're going to go in for 25 years, it will deter you. So Wontumi is caught in the web of a law that was amended by a government that he himself, the party that formed a government that he was a part of, was the Ashanti Regional Chairman of. He wants to lead as a chairman. But another part of this that is also fascinating is that this Wontumi illegality, criminal act, was flagged by the NPP itself. The NPP government flagged him. The minister you see in the shot, Samuel Abu-Jinapor, when he was the Lands and Natural Resources Minister, flagged Akonta Mining's illegal activities. And it was clear. This, he says, any alleged activity, and this is on the back of the work, the investigations that Erastus was doing, any alleged activity being undertaken by Akonta in that forest reserve is illegal. It's illegal. So the MPP government itself, their own minister, had flagged the work of Akonta Mining in a forest reserve as being illegal. On the say-so of the minister, who must authorize any mining, he should have been prosecuted long ago. Long ago. On the back of this, civil society actors like Ashigbe and others filed a petition to the Attorney General, to the CID, to the police, and say, your own minister, your own government says Akonta Mining is involved in illegal mining. You know what happened? Nothing. So this is evidence that the MPP government itself at the time, their principal agent for approving licenses and concessions for mining, came to a conclusion that Akonta Mining, which is owned by Wontumi, is a shareholder, is a director, was engaged in illegal mining. So you have to juxtapose this against what the party is saying today at the press conference, because they have to ask these questions. And Mr. Jinapor was here a week or two ago, and I put that question to him. He didn't want to be drawn into the matters so deeply because, of course, it was before the court. But he said as much, that as far as he's concerned, what he knew then to be fact is what he communicated, which was this. And note the date. This was something that he did on the 30th of September 2022. I'm highlighting that because a year later, the man who appointed the minister then publicly, less than a year, January 4th, 2023, said something entirely different to the whole nation. Akufo-Addo, his subordinate, his appointee says they were involved in illegal mining. Few months later, the boss himself is clearing Akonta Mining. Akonta Mining is not engaged in any illegal mining anywhere in Ghana, he said. See the contradiction there. But that, again, is a failing of him. The minister flagged it. But when the president said this, do you think that the CID, the Attorney General, will move a limb to prosecute when the boss has cleared them, even before any proper investigations is done? And no wonder nothing happened until the raid in October of 2025 led to the arrest of these two gentlemen, who then pointed a finger back at the same gentleman called Wontumi, Chairman Wontumi, Emerson Chukwuechako, who is now behind bars and is gone for 20 years. So, of course, he can appeal. and we'll see whether there's a clear path to appeal. And as I said, the judgment itself had mentioned that path. So we'll see whether they have that path and how grounded that path could be when we sit down for conversation. And then his defense in court was fascinating. I've mentioned bits of this. He did not deny the fact that he gave out this permit, his own permit, to others to mine on the concession or to do some activity on the concession without the authorization of the minister, which the law requires. He didn't deny that, but he says it was for reclamation, planting coconut. So denied authorizing mining. He was clear that what he didn't do was to ask them and authorize them to mine. He didn't do that. It was very clear and that he didn't do that, right? And that the Akunta mining awaited parliamentary approval, ratification. He said he was waiting for that. And then Henry Okum was the gentleman who, by the way, testified for the state. He was the prosecution witness in the matter. The man who dealt directly with Wontumi and said Wontumi gave him, he said Wontumi gave him the right, the permission to mine. Wontumi says, I didn't. I told you to reclaim. Well, he says he handled land reclamation, which is the point that Wontumi was making, and to plant coconut. So there was a contradiction there. So how did the judge come to the conclusion? Because it was Wontumi's word against this man's word, and the judge actually admitted that there's no hard evidence to support either of the positions. And so what did the judge do? She used circumstantial evidence to come to the conclusion who is most probably telling the truth. Fascinating. My guests will weigh in on that point when we sit down. Then the Coconut Project profits were to be shared at the end of it when it matures. Indeed, you should read that document. It's a very fascinating piece of judgment. Then the NDC held a press conference today, obviously. We expected them to do so. And they say a few things that no I mean, if you read the judgment, even Wontumi does not dispute some of the evidence. So when you say this, it's just not supported by the facts. One of the pieces of evidence that was produced, which is the basis of this, that the fact that the law is clear, you cannot, when they offer you a concession, it is exclusively to the leaseholder. It is exclusively, you cannot hand it over, you cannot transfer it to anybody. If you do so without authorization of the minister, you violated the law. Wontumi does not dispute the fact. In fact, in cross-examination, he admitted that is not in dispute, that he gave that right away to somebody else, a third party, to do the activities on that concession. He doesn't dispute. The only dispute is when he gave it away, what instructions he gave, what was his expectation, that it was for reclamation and not to mine, right? So that in itself was one that hasn't been disputed. Overturned judgment on appeal, they are confident that this will happen. Of course, the appeal is his right. He has to go, and the appeals court will decide that. But they raise a fundamentally, which is that there are many other NDC officials who have been accused of similar offenses, who this government has simply gone to bed on, or have decided to exercise selective amnesia. They've forgotten. And he's right. The MPP is right. And that is why we need to call out the NDC too. Because there are a few of their top officials that they themselves referred to Iyoko. And the last time the Attorney General was before the public and meeting the press, and he was asked, he gave us a very flimsy excuse. He didn't know what has happened. And in fact, nobody has updated us. This is the Attorney General who addresses the media regularly on other matters when it has to do with the opposition party. But in none of his other press conferences has he himself come with an update on these cases involving his own colleagues in the party who have been accused of involvement in illegal mining and have been referred to Iyoko by himself. So we need to call that out. And the MPP is right to mention that point. And then the judge ignored judicial procedures. Okay, we'll ask my guests if they agree. And Wontumi, they say, is a political prisoner. And that is a big one. We'll start by asking our guests if they agree that the evidence that we've seen bears us out that the man is a political prisoner.